Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's discussion early time restricted feeding and metabolic syndrome. For those not familiar with metabolic syndrome, it can be categorized by at least three of the following five traits. That is a large waist circumference, greater than 40 inches in men, 35 inches in women, impaired fasting blood glucose, elevated triglycerides, high blood pressure, and low HDL cholesterol. We're also going to be talking about early time restricted feeding and glycemic control. In order to understand why early time restricted feeding might possess some unique benefits and even be the optimal nutrition approach for certain populations, we need a little bit of background about chrononutrition, or the interplay between nutrition and circadian biology. As organisms, we have evolved endogenous circadian rhythms to prepare and anticipate for activity, sleep, and food intake at a specific time of day. Several biological processes related to metabolism, digestion, and hormone secretion possess circadian rhythms, which has important implications for how we structure our nutrition. These endogenous circadian rhythms are primarily generated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus of the brain. This can be considered the master clock, and these rhythms are mainly influenced by the light-dark cycle. Outside of the master clock, we also have peripheral clocks, which can be found in virtually all other tissues and organs. In contrast to the master clock, the peripheral clocks are mainly influenced by the feeding-fasting cycle. Eating over an extended duration of time or at the wrong time of the day can cause circadian misalignment by generating a shift in nutrient sensing pathways in the peripheral clocks, which conflict with the endogenous circadian rhythms produced by the master clock. This misalignment between the master clock and the peripheral clocks can pose adverse cardiometabolic consequences. For example, we commonly see an increased risk of overweight and obesity and type 2 diabetes from shift work, or eating and being awake during the biological night. These outcomes are particularly robust for rotating shift work. Not only are we eating and awake at the wrong time of the night, but with rotating shift work, these periods fluctuate, preventing our bodies from ever having the opportunity to adapt to a consistent schedule. In a very interesting trial conducted by Al Hussein et al., they compared a regular meal pattern of 6 meals per day to an erratic meal pattern featuring anywhere from 3 to 9 meals per day. They observed that with the consistent meal pattern, there was greater dietary induced thermogenesis, or a greater amount of energy was expended absorbing, digesting, and assimilating nutrients. They also observed lower hunger and greater fullness scores pre to post meal in the constant meal group, as well as more favorable glycemic responses to meals. This brings us into specific rhythms of interest related to nutrient metabolism. For decades now, we've consistently observed that glucose tolerance tends to peak in the morning. In one such trial displaying this point, Sania et al. Performed an oral glucose tolerance test in pre-diabetic subjects at 2 time points, one at 7 a.m. and one at 7 p.m. At 2 hours post-test, the glycemic response at 7 p.m. was 40 points greater. At 3 hours, this gap widened to 62 milligrams per deciliters. Similar results have been observed in healthy subjects, even when the test meal was comprised of low glycemic index ingredients. In one particularly interesting study, the researchers observed the glycemic response to an early lunch at 1 p.m. and a late lunch at 4:30 p.m. And this 3.5-hour time difference was sufficient to observe a 46% decrease in glucose tolerance at the late lunch. Diet-induced thermogenesis has also been observed to be greater in the morning. In a trial conducted by Memoirs et al., they found that dietary-induced thermogenesis 114 minutes after a meal was 44% lower at 8 p.m. compared to 8 a.m. Other rhythms of interest include gastric emptying, which is slower in the evening, cortisol, which peaks in the morning, and epinephrine, which also appears to be higher in the morning. And epinephrine is associated with increases in metabolic rate and glucose oxidation. Together, these findings suggest that human metabolism is optimized for food intake in the morning. We've established from a circadian biology perspective that human metabolism might be primed for energy intake earlier in the day. The next question then becomes, are there real-world benefits to be derived from this strategy? Many of you might be familiar with the observational research on breakfast skipping with an increased risk for obesity and type 2 diabetes. However, as a product of being observational research, it cannot establish causality. That means it is not to say that breakfast skipping leads to obesity and type 2 diabetes. Rather, individuals with these conditions might be skipping breakfast as a way to improve their current state. With that being said, we do have some compelling intervention trials displaying numerous positive effects from shifting a larger proportion of energy to earlier in the day. First off, we have the Bath Bed Project, which was a 6-week randomized controlled trial that compared a group fasting until 12 p.m. each day with a breakfast group that consumed at least 700 calories before 11 a.m. At the end of this trial, it was reported that the breakfast group consistently engaged in more light-intensity physical activity, which is a particularly intriguing outcome because this suggests that there may have been an effect of consuming more calories earlier in the day on spontaneous behaviors. That is, the subjects were subconsciously moving around more throughout the day, leading to an increase in activity thermogenesis, rather than partaking in more voluntary exercise at high intensities. We also see that moving a higher proportion of calories to earlier in the day can improve weight loss effectiveness. In a 12-week intervention led by Yakubowicz, they compared 2 isocaloric weight loss diets with equal macronutrient content. The only difference was the distribution of energy. In the breakfast group, 50% of total daily energy intake was consumed between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. In the other group, this distribution was reversed, and 50% of total daily energy intake was consumed at dinner between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Both groups lost a substantial amount of weight in the end, but the breakfast group experienced a 2.5-fold greater weight loss on average. The breakfast group also had greater decreases in fasting glucose, insulin, and triglycerides. In type 2 diabetics specifically, shifting a larger proportion of calories to earlier in the day has been shown to improve fasting and bedtime glucose levels, leading to improved 24-hour glycemic control and reducing the need for medications. Moving on to time-restricted feeding, this dietary approach aims to maintain a consistent daily cycle of feeding and fasting to support circadian rhythms. It is thought that by regulating the feeding-fasting cycle, we can rescue circadian alignment and therefore attenuate several metabolic dysfunctions. We now have a collection of human trials demonstrating that time-restricted feeding, or simply reducing the duration of the daily feeding window, is an effective approach to reduce body weight and markers of metabolic syndrome, regardless of when this window takes place. Early time restricted feeding. We're finally here, everyone. We have an understanding of chrononutrition. We've established the benefits of reducing the duration of the daily feeding window. Early time restricted feeding combines these areas. It aims to bolster the effects of time restricted feeding by eating in alignment with circadian rhythms. So we're reducing the duration of the daily feeding window, and we're also eating during a period of time where human metabolism is primed for energy intake. To establish the positive effects of this dietary strategy, we have a landmark trial by Sutton et al., which showed cardiometabolic benefits of early time restricted feeding independent of weight loss. This was a randomized crossover trial in pre-diabetic men. It compared early time restricted feeding, which utilized a 6-hour daily eating period with dinner before 3 p.m., to a control which had a 12-hour eating period. Both interventions lasted 5 weeks, and subjects took part in both interventions. Diets were designed to maintain body weight and matched on a meal-by-meal basis to eliminate potential confounding effects from differences in food intake or meal frequency. Further, participants were provided with all food by the study staff, and participants were monitored while they were eating each meal. This was an extremely rigorously controlled trial, and we can be sure that these results were a product of differences in meal timing and the duration of the feeding window. The results showed that early time restricted feeding resulted in decreased fasting insulin and mean and peak insulin values in response to an oral glucose tolerance test. Correspondingly, there were significant increases in beta cell responsiveness and significant decreases in insulin resistance observed in the early time restricted feeding group. Lastly, early time restricted feeding lowered morning systolic and diastolic blood pressure by 10 and 11 points respectively. Again, these very impressive results occurred despite the fact that there were no changes in body weight that have taken place to assess the potential benefits of early time restricted feeding. And this data has consistently shown the ability of this dietary approach to increase insulin sensitivity and improve glycemic control. In one particular trial I'd like to highlight by Hutchinson et al., they compared 2 7-day time-restricted feeding conditions in men at risk for diabetes. In this randomized crossover trial, the early condition ate from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., while the late condition ate from 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. Both conditions led to modest weight loss and significant reductions in the glycemic response to a test meal. There were also significant reductions in fasting triglycerides. So we see numerous benefits to simply reducing the duration of the daily feeding window, regardless of the period of time utilized. However, fasting glucose, as measured by a continuous glucose monitor, was only lower during early time-restricted feeding compared to baseline. The powerful effects of early time-restricted feeding have been corroborated by Mazaitis and Bhatnagar, who published data from 243 of their patients with diabetes. They noted that patients who modified their lifestyle to a meal timing pattern of 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. have been the most successful in losing weight and improving their glycemic profile with fewer medications. In the featured chart, we have glucose data from one particular individual with type 2 diabetes. On top is their fasting glucose while on medications, and on bottom is their fasting glucose off all medications while following the aforementioned meal timing pattern. As evidence here, they were able to more or less maintain euglycemia off all medications simply through modifying their lifestyle. To summarize the main points from our discussion today, the modern food environment, as well as certain lifestyle behaviors, are desynchronized with endogenous circadian rhythms, and this has led to serious impairments in health. We can help attenuate these dysfunctions by rescuing circadian alignment, and we can do this through manipulating the daily feeding fasting cycle. Current evidence suggests that there are benefits from both consuming a larger proportion of daily energy intake earlier in the day, as well as reducing the duration of the daily feeding window, but the most robust improvements in numerous physical markers of health are likely derived from combining these approaches through early time-restricted feeding.